from here moving forward, your first goal is do no more harm. Like just do no more harm to this relationship. There's already been, pain, betrayal, hurt, fear, all the things that many of us are familiar with. But every text message, every email, every roll of the eye, every story that we tell publicly or privately about our spouse, like all of that can do harm to the family that lives on. So that was really good advice. And trust me, we didn't always get it right. And the other interesting thing she said was, your goal is to become indifferent towards each other. And in the moment, I don't even know that I've fully understood, like, what does she mean by that? Because when I think of indifference, I'm like it doesn't matter. I don't have any feelings. Like, I don't care. Like, I will always care about this man. I will always have feelings about him. I'm not going to become numb. But what I really started to realize is that it was more about, I don't get triggered. I don't get escalated. I don't engage in the old stories anymore.
Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self-care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Before we start the next conversation, I want to invite you to check out my amazing book, The Gift Inside, a powerful guide for healing your body, mind, and soul. Reclaim your strengths and awaken your true potential. Whether you are navigating heartbreak or simply seeking deeper fulfillment, this book offers the tools to turn your struggles into triumphs. It is time to unlock the gift within you. Available now on Amazon, or you can check it out on my website www.irinashehovsov.com. Today we have a special guest, Karen McNenny, joining us from Missoula, Montana. She is a mediator, divorce coach, and therapist dedicated to transforming how families navigate divorce. Through her good divorce experience, she helps couples not only get divorced, but also learn how to maintain healthy post-divorce relationships, especially when children are involved. With more than 25 years of expertise, Karen focuses on co-parenting, financial planning, and relationship literacy, guiding families towards compassionate outcomes. A TEDx speaker and host of the Good Divorce Show podcast, Karen draws from her own divorce journey to offer hope and healing. She lives in Missoula, Montana, with her family and dog, enjoying the outdoors in the Rocky Mountains. Welcome, Karen. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Irina. I am delighted to be here. And I think it's such an important topic that doesn't get a lot of attention because there is a lot of single parents out there running around, maybe feeling a little isolated and unsupported. So thank you for the work you do.
So please share with us your story. How did you become a single parent?
Well, first of all, was never on my to-do list. Like most of us, I did not set out to be a single parent. And like many of your listeners, there was a love story. 2 children were born from love. And 10 years down the road, it was clear that that marriage was not going to have the long journey or the fairy tale ending. So we divorced 13 years ago at the moment of this broadcast. And one of the things we really identified early on is even though our marriage was ending, our relationship was not ever going to end. And for those of you listening, I think that's just such a powerful reminder in terms of what we choose to carry around and the baggage or the anger or the resentments. At some point, it just isn't going to serve you anymore because this other co-parent, and I know there are some listeners who maybe have lost their co-parent to death, or maybe they have just exited stage left and are not having any involvement in the raising of their children. But I'm fortunate in that I think of myself as a single parent household and not necessarily a single parent, because I do have a co-parent and that relationship is really valuable. Our children were 5 and 7 years old when we moved into 2 homes. So we were right about kindergarten and first grade. And those two kids are now 18 and 20, getting ready to graduate high school, and one already launched to college. So I say we have done it all from kindergarten to college and learned along the way how to not end our relationship, but really how to renovate it in the best interest of better supporting our children, because that really is the one thing that we still have to do well.
Totally. And I love that. Thank you. What were some of the struggles or challenges you dealt with when you became a single parent, or everything was kind of a smooth ride?
No, especially the first, I would say even 3 to 5 years of adjusting. And there's these little subtle things, like financially we're adjusting. Most of us who go from a 2-income household to a single income household, that is a big shift. And some of us end up downsizing our homes. I stayed in the family home and ended up doing some literal renovation, and we turned the basement into an apartment so that I could rent that out and help support my ability to stay in that house, which I wanted to do for a period of time. I knew it was financially a reach for me at that moment, but we were really committed to not changing everything for our kids. There was already a lot changing. So if there were a few things that we could keep the same, that was our goal. So keeping that home for 2 more years, I was able to do by renting things out. And we also tried to really hold on to some early traditions. We were able to have every Christmas morning together, and we alternated homes. But what would happen, and the kids knew it, is they'd wake up wherever they were, hop in bed with that parent, and then we'd call the other parent, say, "We're awake, come over, come over, come over." Other parent would arrive, come into the living room, and then the kids would walk into the living room, and we would both be able to be there to see the wide eyes, the things that had been left by Santa, the stockings that had been stuffed. And we really made a commitment to try and be side by side at every important moment for the kids. And, that stretched from activities at school to piano recitals, getting their wisdom teeth taken out. My son just had his tonsils taken out. And it was interesting, Irina, we actually rescheduled our interview because this was happening. And husband, that's what I refer to him as, my husband and I, we basically had a hospital date. We spent the entire day together in that waiting room. And again, this is 13 years later. And I would say, we're not like friends. We're not going out and doing things on our own, but we are absolutely friendly. And I would say that's part of the goal. And in those early years, as I was saying, there's a pain. I would even say like a phantom pain sometimes when I think about it, when that story and that partner has come to an end. And, divorce sits therapeutically in this category referred to as ambiguous loss. Alzheimer's also falls into that category. Losing someone whose body was never retrieved. Maybe they were lost in the mountains or a prisoner of war, or, these things where someone is gone but still there. And divorce in particular is really tricky because your spouse is gone and that story and that partnership is gone, but they are totally still in your life. And that is a tricky tension of how we grieve through that. And it is a death. And I really want your listeners to hear that and to recognize if they're struggling right now, and what I call the bathroom floor mornings, right? Where how many tears can one person cry in a lifetime? Well, there is a lot in those early days. Ironically, there's also a certain amount of relief. This is what I call the grief relief continuum, where, we've exited this marriage in hopes of improving the relationship, not make it worse. If you want it to get worse, just stay in the bad marriage. It's going to get worse. Divorce is an exit strategy to reconstruct the family, renovate that primary relationship, and hope that everyone is doing better on the other side of it.
I love that. Yes. And Heiko, the two of you it was kind of a joint willingness to continue in that way, or was it kind of, or were you kind of pulling your spouse into kind of, let's do this together. We are in this together for the rest of our life.
And it's a great question, because I can almost hear some of your listeners thinking, this is a fantasy world. That sort of cooperation would never happen with my spouse. So the first thing I would say to you is, behavior is contagious. So we can be the one to set the tone and set the model. It doesn't always get matched, but you'd be surprised if you extend a kindness, an appreciation to your co-parent. It does soften the edges and the prickles, and we're all hurting so much in those early years, that trying to kind of rise above it. And Michael and I, we didn't have one of those long, litigious, lots of assets, business fighting. We didn't want to go to court. We tried to do it on our own. We were in agreement immediately about, I would stay in the home. It would always be a 50-50 arrangement with our co-parenting. We would split everything with the kids 50-50. We didn't want to engage in child support. We were both educated. We were both employed, and we wanted to walk into our next chapter autonomous as individuals, which I think helps. The more tethers you have, and especially financial tethers, whether that's alimony, we now call spousal support, or child support, and I'm not dismissing those. There are times when that absolutely is essential. But for us, we found a way to say, let's go forth, do good work ourselves, and support our kids equally. And I would say from the outset, well, actually, what I'll share is, of course, we were in couples counseling when we came to the final decision to get divorced. And I don't think that's unusual. I think there's a lot of couples who are, fighting for the marriage, fighting to save it, which is great. I am pro-family, and therapy can be a wonderful way to grow for yourself, individually as well as in your couple. So we were sitting with our fourth and final couples counselor. We had rinse and repeat. Boy, we went at it, gave it the old college try. And on the day where I remember our therapist is looking at us and saying, well, I think my work here is done. And we looked at each other, and we went home, and we had some conversation, and by the time I remember we were sitting side by side on the couch that night, the kids had been put to bed, and we both had a tear, and we were holding hands, and it was just so sad. And we realized, gosh, I'm having a little sadness thinking about it. And we're like, I guess this is the gate, right? And we're going to cross over. And we went back to that therapist, and we said, could you help us? Like, okay, we're going to dissolve our marriage, but how can we do it well? Like, we don't know how to tell our kids this news. We don't know how to write a parenting plan or do transitions or talk about money going forward. Like, we still have to communicate. How do we tell the grandparents and the larger circle? Like, there was just so much beyond dividing assets. And I think we have a really limited scope of understanding kind of the long tail of divorce in this culture. And I know there's listeners around the world, but in the American culture, divorce is handed to you on not a silver platter, kind of a crappy old wooden full of nails and slivers, like, here you go, buck up, it's going to suck. There's going to be destruction. You'll be enemies at the end, and you're all going to come out financially ruined. Oh, and your children, they're probably not going to do very well in life. That's what kept me paralyzed in my marriage, was the fear of that kind of divorce. And Michael and I looked at each other and we're like, well, why would we want to do that? We have a forever relationship. I do not want to be your enemy. That sounds terrible. Well, our marriage counselor said, I can do one more session with you, but then it's kind of out of my scope. So we sat down with her and she did give us a few tips, and one of them was from here moving forward, your first goal is do no more harm. Like just do no more harm to this relationship. There's already been, pain, betrayal, hurt, fear, all the things that many of us are familiar with. But every text message, every email, every roll of the eye, every story that we tell publicly or privately about our spouse, like all of that can do harm to the family that lives on. So that was really good advice. And trust me, we didn't always get it right. And the other interesting thing she said was, your goal is to become indifferent towards each other. And in the moment, I don't even know that I've fully understood, like, what does she mean by that? Because when I think of indifference, I'm like it doesn't matter. I don't have any feelings. Like, I don't care. I'm like, I will always care about this man. I will always have feelings about him. I'm not going to become numb. But what I really started to realize is that it was more about, I don't get triggered. I don't get escalated. I don't engage in the old stories anymore. And when I'm working with clients, as you know, as a divorce coach and co-parenting specialist, and I do mediation, and my ideal is when I can work with both clients, both parents together through their divorce journey. Really what I was looking for from our therapist, and there was no one there. All you could find was a lawyer who was going to divide up your stuff, but no one was going to teach you how to be divorced. They were only going to help you get divorced. And so when I talk to my clients about this idea of being indifferent, I think about it like a wound, like a physical wound, like a scab that you keep going back and you pick at it and you pick at it. I'm like, stop picking at it. It will just keep bleeding. And some days it'll get infected. Then you've really got a hot mess. The goal is for that woundedness, those old emotions and those feelings and triggers to just scar over. And, many of us are walking around with physical scars and they all have a story. And most of them have a heroic story of something we survived, something we came through. It's not as if it didn't happen, but it's something that I endured, that I rose above it, and I can show it as like, look what I survived. And it's interesting because actual scars, if like you push on them right in where that tissue, they don't have any feeling. The nerve endings kind of die in that space. And I just think that's such a gift to all of us. Like, just stop picking at the scab, everyone.
I love that analogy. Yeah, because I call sometimes we get into the cycle of picking. What we don't realize is we hurt ourselves in the process. We're not solving anything. We're just making ourselves sick. And
it's so true. So true. I can remember early on, like going on a walk with a friend who happened to be a social worker, and I was just raging and huffing and puffing and so upset and so irritated. And she said two things. First, she said, Karen, has Michael ever demonstrated any of these behaviors before? And I'm like, yes, the entire time I've known him. And she's like, well, why do you think it's going to be different now? Your ex-husband is the same person as your husband. So you got to embrace that as a reality. And of course, it's so obvious, but it did kind of stop me in my tracks. And then the other thing she said is, Karen, it's as if you just keep taking the poison every day and hoping he dies. Stop it. You really are, like you said, Irina, we're just doing damage to ourselves. And like literally, biologically and physically, when we carry around that kind of stress and resentment and bitterness, it does damage to our psychological health and our physical health.
Yeah, and people around us as well.
That's right. It spills out, it oozes.
Yeah. So looking back, you asked me this amazing thing, like, what would you do differently? How would you do single parenting differently, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, there's probably a long list, actually, because again, as parents, whether we're in, one home with our co-parent or we're in two homes, we're going to get it wrong, folks. We will wound our children. We will have to repair. But what comes to mind specifically around my relationship with their father and my behavior is, I think there were times where even if I wasn't setting out to badmouth their dad, and we hear this all the time, like, don't speak poorly about the other parent, don't throw them under the bus. But it can happen in little subtle ways. I was on a walk with my daughter, and we were just chatting about the weekend and what activities were coming up and what kind of homework, we would be transitioning for the weekend. And this was my midweek time to connect with her. And she's like, well, I've got this project and I think my brother has this thing. And oh yeah, and I got to study for that. And I just keep walking along and not even under my breath. I'm like, why could your dad not take care of some of this during the week? And you all could have gone to the store and picked up those supplies for the project. And now we have a whole week. And I just went off complaining with irritation. And she stopped me in my tracks. She's like, that I don't need to hear that. And I don't know what to do with that. And it would just be better if you just didn't say all that stuff. And she was completely right. And in that moment, I apologized, right? Rather than getting defensive. So I think that's something I learned. Like, we need to repair when we get it wrong, and we can apologize to our kids. And I said, I'm sorry, you're right. And we started walking again. And I picked up the sword. I'm like, I'm just irritated that this weekend, and I wanted to go for a hike with you all, but now we have to go out and she's like, doing it again, Mom. And I said, I am so sorry. And then I realized I could empower her with a tool for her to protect herself from her parents. I said, I'm going to get this wrong again, I'm sure, but I'm going to try not to. But you have full permission that if you feel like you're caught in the middle, or you're hearing something from your parents, or you're getting questions you don't want to answer, to just bring it to our attention. And she's the one now, because the other thing that I really learned, so not only talking poorly about the co-parent is just tacky, it's uncomfortable, and our child, they love that person. They don't want to hear or endure negativity, right? And we want them to have a healthy relationship with both parents. But the other thing we do is, maybe ask the question of like, so, is your dad traveling this weekend, or is he going to be around? Or like, so do you think your dad's going to, take care of half of soccer? And we start putting them in the position of being the negotiator, the mediator, the communicator, really like the spy kids. Also, totally need to avoid that. And so my kids know, because I gave them permission and I gave them the language. If you are getting asked questions that you don't want to be any of those things, you just get to say, sounds like a good question for Dad. You should probably ask him. Oh, yeah, it sounds like you and Dad need to have a conversation about that. And they are empowered to also help us all be successful.
Yes, thank you. I love that. Very great analogy. And you have your kids kind of put a mirror to your face, like, stop, you're doing it again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Instead of keep on venting and venting and venting and not resolving anything. So how did you, I call it, so did your personal experience, or were you always a divorce mediator? How did you get to do what you do now? What happened?
I think this work, as I mentioned, at the time that I was getting divorced, I was looking for something more for our family, more than a lawyer. And it just wasn't there. And, we did well in our divorce. Other families noticed that. People started asking me. I've spent 20 years in corporate America working as a consultant. And my area of expertise is human behavior, relationships. I'm a certified mediator. So sometimes I'm in the work environment doing workplace mediation. I do a lot of executive coaching, trying to help people create a work environment that breathes life into employees rather than sucking life out. So those skills, and it really happened during the pandemic because I was no longer speaking at national conferences. I wasn't leading retreats. There was not training happening at work because, oh yeah, nobody was at work. And it was the quiet time. And I was about a decade into my divorce. So things weren't raw. I had a lot of perspective. And, late night Googling will lead you somewhere. And a couple of friends and actually business people that I was working with knew that I had had a positive divorce experience. And it was really something we just figured out on our own, different tactics. I'm like, well, this would make more sense. Well, this would make more sense. Well, let's do this. Well, let's try that. And so I wanted to begin to help other families doing this, like having a doula, like when you have a baby, what it is to have a midwife or a doula or someone there to guide you. Well, what if there was a divorce doula? What if there was a divorce coach, a divorce consultant, someone who would help you with that long-term relationship? So I started Googling up and I discovered, oh, there actually are people doing this, and there are training programs, and there is a pioneering movement in our country to change how we do divorce, how we support families going through divorce. I think it is a highly neglected um, subset of our culture, divorce families. They usually get shamed and isolated, and then you got to figure it out on your own. So I jumped right on board. I had already trained as a therapist in grad school. I had already been trained as a mediator. I had been doing work in the human behavior relationship space in the professional world. And I immediately jumped on board with the CDC and became a certified divorce coach and a certified co-parenting specialist. I continue my training. I'm a crucial conversations trainer. I'm a gracious space facilitator. A lot of the tools that I was using in the workplace, where I still spend 50% of my time, I now also utilize with families. So in many ways, when families come to me, I'm really am more of a divorce consultant. Coaching is a piece of that because we might need to talk about real estate. We might need a communication plan, not just with the kids, but also with the grandparents or the friends. I just helped a couple write basically a public service announcement to their 25 closest friends and family members so that everyone was getting the same message at the same time. They were ahead of the headlines, right? Own your message. Don't pick sides. We're not going to court. We're doing this differently. We're asking for your support. When you see us, please don't ask us why, only ask us how we're doing, right? Those are the sorts of things. And so this wraparound service that I have crafted in the Good Divorce Experience, to me, creates a launch pad, a new start for that family that is going to give them greater stability, and really some hope that they don't have to be across enemy lines. And then, like you, of course, I started a podcast, and I was actually asked to start a leadership podcast by a production company. And I said, I don't actually want to do a leadership podcast. I want to do a podcast about divorce, and I want to call it the Good Divorce Show because we don't usually hear those two words together. We don't think of that as an option. And I want to have families on my show. I want couples who are divorced. I want adult children of divorce. I want those children and their parents to come on the show and talk about positive experiences. Because mostly what is amplified, again, in our culture, in our media, even in our entertainment world, War of the Roses, big celebrity drawn out, it's on the tabloids, lots of drama. Like we only hear the big, dramatic, dreadful stories of divorce. So I've taken it upon, a personal mission to amplify the positive stories along with experts in the field who are also interested in helping families to know how to do it well. If there is a shark lawyer out there who just wants to help you to crush the other co-parent and get as much money as possible, you're not going to be on my show. You're just not. There's enough of that. I am only looking for people who want to fertilize a garden of hope and compassion and a future where everybody can grow. And I love this work. I know it might sound weird, but I know it's making a difference. I know my families are better for it, and they're grateful when they find me. And again, listeners, it's not just the good divorce coach, Karen McNenny. There are many of us out there beginning a movement to support families and individuals like you so that your co-parenting relationship into the future doesn't get destroyed in the midst of the divorce, because that is but one wrinkle in time in the journey of your family.
Thank you, and thank you so much for what you do. I think we get fooled into believing that divorce is easy because it's so easy for us to get married. You just go sign the certificate.
It's so easy. It's dangerously easy to get married. And it's very complicated and very emotionally difficult to get divorced.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. What kind of advice can you share with single parents who are just stepping onto the journey of single parenting?
Yeah. So, again, particularly for those of you who find yourself maybe in a divorce situation and it's new, there is, again, this kind of teeter-totter between, now I'm a single parent and I've got my kids all the time and there's not a lot of respite. So making sure that during that time you are finding balance and boundaries. And then there's this little surprise moment when the kids transition. Early on, it's kind of a cliff. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with all this time. But should I clean and do laundry? Should I go shopping? Should I go to the bar and start flirting and drinking heavily? Like, all of the above might occur. But there is also this moment of silence in your home, an emptiness in your home that is so loud and painful. Like I was talking about that phantom pain. And when my kids are in my home, their friends are in my home, there's snacks, there's activity, we're doing homework, we're watching movies. Like, it is just a little buzzing beehive. And I, for one, love it. But as soon as they transition to the other parent, especially in those early days, it can be really disorienting. So I advise on every transition day, until you don't need it anymore, you make sure you have a plan. Where am I going for dinner? Who is coming over to have dinner with me? I'm going to invite myself out somewhere. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go do my grocery shopping. And again, groceries are such a funny thing, because you go from like 6 bags of groceries because the kids are in the house. And now I just eat, potato chips and string cheese for the rest of the week when I'm alone. And you're balancing, right? All of this different kind of balancing. And to embrace, I think something I didn't do early enough, one is to make that plan on transition day for myself so that you don't hit the bathroom floor. Like, make a plan, have it, your own transition strategy. I need to go do something. I probably need to leave the house. I need to meet with a friend, and let your friends know that that's something you're looking for. I have a podcast episode that is specifically, I think it's even titled, "For those of you watching the divorce go down, this is what you need to know. How to support people in divorce." I always say, if I had had a cancer diagnosis, people would have been showing up all the time on my front porch. There would have been casseroles in my freezer for a month. But divorce, we kind of don't know how to support those people or how to react. And don't wait to start enjoying that time when you don't have your kids, when you're not just a single parent, but now I'm a single person. And for a long time, I had such guilt. Like, I shouldn't take a trip without my kids. Like, oh, I shouldn't go and visit those friends without them, or I shouldn't go have fun. I should have no benefit to me. I should only be punished as a divorced parent, right? That there's kind of that undercurrent. So it took me a while, like probably a couple years, before I started to go, oh yeah, my kids, they're with their dad having a grand time that week. I'm totally going to meet you in Hawaii and have a week on the beach. And at spring break, I will take my kids to Hawaii, or we'll have our road trip, right? It isn't yes or no. It's yes and. Yes, I will make memories with my kids. Yes, we will do special, wonderful things. And I will make memories for myself as I re-identify as a single person.
Thank you. Yes, yes. It's so important that we are still people and we shouldn't be putting ourselves on the back burner. If we don't fill our cup first, then we are not showing up as the best version of ourselves for others. So yeah, I totally on board with you, to take care of yourself first and prepare for the times. I didn't have that because kids are always with me. So I didn't have that transition
Yeah,
period. But you make a very good point that I called when you, I don't know who said it, it's when you plan something, you're planning to win, and if you don't plan, you're planning to fail. But
that's
kind
right.
of to prevent something from happening and
Mhm,
have a clear idea, yeah, like what are you
mhm.
doing when your kids are not around?
And
Where you have dinner and how you spend your day so you don't
yep,
crash down on the
so
bus.
exactly. So that you don't crash. And my heart goes out to parents like yourself who truly are single parents. Or the primary single parent. Maybe there is a co-parent out there that has one weekend a month or some time in the summer, or you geographically are separated, or that parent just either isn't alive or isn't present. That is a entirely different challenge. But I would suggest to you that the same guidelines apply, and that you do build a network so that even if you don't have a co-parent to rely on, are there friends and family so that your kids have a slumber party? Oh, and if you have more than one kid, coordinate all of them to be gone on the same weekend so that you have a weekend to yourself, or that there's one day a week after school where they are all in an activity or all connected with a friend, so that you have one longer day to yourself. Whatever strategy it is, that self-preservation and self-love, and to do it without guilt. Guilt is a liability. It will not serve you. You must take care of yourself and you must have space. Single parenting is exhausting and it is relentless, and it does not end if you are the one and only. So you have to strategize.
Totally, totally. Thank you. Thank you. What do you think is the most important trait to instill in a child?
Oh, self-love, self-esteem. I had a mentor. I grew up as an actress and a dancer. That was my background, is in the performing arts. And there was a wonderful woman, Jan Snow, who ran the ballet company and the studio. And her daughter, and her daughter was born in the time that I was there, and I watched her grow up and graduate. And she was just this amazing person. And she was a child of divorce, and um, her parents had a good relationship, divorce. And I asked her, I said, what advice do you have? I just think your daughter is so solid. And she said, the most important thing is that when my child leaves my home and goes out into the world, that she loves herself. Because when we love ourselves and we live a life free of shame, we make very different choices for ourselves. We have better boundaries about what we will and will not accept from others and how they treat us. We make decisions of things that are healthy for us because we love our bodies. We love who we are. We believe we have something to contribute in the world. And again, have I always gotten it right? Absolutely not. I actually finally had my own daughter on my podcast. I didn't invite her. She invited herself. Soon as she went off to college, first semester, coming home for Christmas, she's 18. She's like, maybe I should be a guest on your show, Mom. I'm like, oh, what do you think? She's like, I got a few things to say. And as a family, we talked about it, right? With her dad, with her brother. I said, you all can listen to it before it goes live. And we sat down, and I love that episode, right? And one of those moments, I was talking about the parenting plan, and she went, wait, hold on. A parenting plan? Like, what do you mean? What's a parenting plan? I said, oh, we all have a parenting plan that, like, It's multiple pages and it talks about how everything gets paid for and what your schedule is and how much time we get and how the holidays are spent. She went, really? That is so weird. I had no idea. And I thought, oh, that is the best parenting plan of all. The one the kids don't even know about.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. What had inspired you on your journey? Is there any book that you can recommend that you've read that kind of...
Oh, in fact, I'm going to turn to my bookcase that's right here, and a lot of the books that I recommend to my families. The Good Divorce. In fact, I'm just going to grab them. Constance Ahrens has 2 books. She has since passed, but The Good Divorce and We're Still Family. These books were written, I think, in the 80s. So she really was pioneering, but she was one of the early ones. And when I became the Good Divorce coach, did my branding and started the Good Divorce show, I didn't even know this book existed. So I feel like her legacy lives on. And she also has another one, Divorced Families. Certainly Conscious Uncoupling. If you're listening to this podcast because you maybe are thinking about life as a single parent and it's one of your concerns and you actually haven't started the process of reconstructing your family, Conscious Loving, Conscious Uncoupling. Another one that actually is from the business world, but I think it's really useful here, is Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Necessary Endings. I just love the title. And again, I think one of the mistakes that we make is that we stay in marriages longer than we should. We just stay too long. I kind of think about like the mayonnaise jar in the fridge, and we take it out and we take off the lid and there's like some green stuff growing on it. And we're like, well, it's not in the jar, it's just on the lid. And we wipe it out and we put the lid back on and we stick it back in the refrigerator. And we hope that it's not going to go bad. And the next time we take the jar out, oh, there's a little bit, but it's only on this. Look, at most of the jar is good. I'm not going to throw that away. And I agree, we should fight for our families. We should fight for our marriages. We should lean on books and podcasts and therapists and marriage counselors to help us to learn. Because again, super easy to get married, but nobody really teaches us much in what I refer to as relationship literacy. But that mayonnaise jar, it's going bad. So do you want to wait until you're puking and have food poisoning and everything in the fridge has gone bad? Or can we really just be conscious and recognize this marriage, this relationship is complete and it's starting to do damage. It's starting to make all of us a little bit sick. And rather than wait till, I think we have this misconception that like the house has to be burned down. Like we sit there and we're like, well, it's not like he's cheating on me. It's not like she spends all the money. It's not like there's an addiction issue. It's not like we have to have some giant catastrophic headline in order to justify a dignified ending to a relationship that has hit its expiration date, right? We don't give much permission for that. Everything else in our society, you can change your hair, change your job, change your house, change where you live, change your car, like change it up, keep it alive. But no, once you lock into marriage, double down, you shall not change. We know divorce is going to happen. We know that it's happening at high rates, and it becomes damaging because people just wait too long and we don't provide kind of an exit strategy like necessary endings, like the good divorce, and to find your way out. So I just say that for those of you that might be listening who are teetering or in the beginning and wondering, can this be done differently? Yes, it can.
Yeah, you're so right. And maybe staying in marriage too long comes from our upbringing and how our parents used to be together no matter what. We gotta stay together for the sake of the kids. But on the other hand, what are we teaching our kids? How we always fight, how to like not treat each other right? What kind of example are we showing? Yes, we are kind of together for the outside world, but internally, what's happening? And I think it's changing little by little. I mean, when I became a single parent, I was the only outlier. I didn't have any, everybody was kind of together and appeared happy on the outside. And now, how many already years? 9 years later,
Yeah,
10 years
9 years.
there is more and more single parents that are coming up, and
Mhm.
it's like becoming the new normal. But of course,
Right.
it's every normal. I mean, everybody is unique and their situation is unique and their relationship is unique. And we shouldn't be looking at other people or making kind of this judgment. This is how it's supposed to be. I think we're all kind of walking individual journeys. And I love kind of the work that you are doing. You're so right that lawyers are there just to kind of for the business of divorce. They
That's
get
right.
all the money, but then you're left. It's like your life is still not over. You still gotta keep living, surviving, thriving. You
Mhm.
gotta keep on going, but there is no support. There is nobody nobody teaches you how to process emotions or how to deal with loss or how to anytime there is a divorce ending, it's like a loss of a family, a loss of your idea about life. And how do you deal with all that in
How do
addition
you?
to your day-to-day life,
That's
going
right.
to work and doing your regular
Hmm.
day-to-day stuff, and then you
Hmm.
have this heavy thing kind of hanging on you. How do you get out of that? How do you take that step? And thank you so much for the work you are doing. It is so,
No.
so needed. And I love how you say it, like a doula for divorce. Not
Yes,
just get divorced, but how do you stay divorced and how do you, you know, live life?
that's right. And I think there's those three stages. We're going through divorce. I'm recovering from divorce. And now I'm divorced. And there are so many stages in that. You even talk about like work. I've worked in the business sector for over 20 years. And when people are going through divorce, they're kind of worthless at work. You don't sleep, you're stressed all the time, you're distracted. Like it is so emotionally disorienting. And I have really started to talk to the human resource community. And I hope in the next chapter of my career in doing this work, it is really connected to advocacy and things like the Family Medical Leave Act, where I've got an aging parent I need to take care of. We've got something medical happening. There's been a death in the family. We've got a cancer diagnosis. Like we wrap our arms around those employees and give them the time and space that they need. Why do we not do that for people navigating divorce? Because in terms of an emotional experience, it is no different. In terms of their capacity to be productive and focused at work, it is no different. And again, this is where I say families moving through divorce are neglected, ignored, and sometimes outright shamed for the journey they're having. And we're almost in denial, like, well, it shouldn't happen. And again, I'm pro family. I'm not pro divorce, but it's happening. I also am not pro cancer, but it's happening. And so we as a culture and a community and a society are finding ways to support people in all of these other difficult parts of their life. Well, this is one of them. And I think if we gave it more attention, we would start doing it better and it would have a less negative effect on children, on society, the economics. Like we can just do better together.
Yes, totally. Thank you. I love that. Is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to share?
Oh, Irina, I feel like we could talk for weeks. And again, it is just so wonderful that you are highlighting successful single parent stories through your platform. Because again, we don't always get a lot of support in that way. And when we hear the story, when we see in our mind's eye what it looks like, what it sounds like, then it makes it possible for all of us to be more successful in our single parenting. So thank you for having me as a guest, for providing a microphone for these stories to be amplified. And I always want to say to your listeners from the Good Divorce Coach, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Very well said. Thank you. Thank you so much. If people would like to learn more about you, connect with you, where would they go?
The easiest thing is Google the Good Divorce Coach or the Good Divorce Show. You'll also find me through Karen McNenny. Those are a few more letters, but the Good Divorce Coach will get you to my website. It'll get you to the podcast, to my YouTube channel, and an opportunity. And I always say the first hour is always free with me. So if anyone, and not only do I do divorce consulting and coaching, but I do co-parent coaching. So couples that have been divorced, maybe for a year, maybe for 3 years, and they're still really struggling, I'm your gal. I'm going to come back and help you do some of the repair and renovation and skill building that didn't happen at the time of divorce. It is never too late to have a good divorce.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom, your story, and you're right, we could talk for hours, but I really appreciate the work you are doing and also providing that service for people that, life is possible after divorce and it can even be great, and setting good examples with good divorce. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.